You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hello everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Thanks again for tuning in for another fun conversation. This is a podcast that shares and inspires unconventional career journeys, and I do hope that my guest and I can really push you to have another spark, get inspired once again, and lead a happy, wealthy, wise, and healthy life. Please help the podcast grow by telling your friends all about it, leaving us a nice review. You can be a subscriber yourself if you haven't done that before. It also helps if you go to omdventures.com and explore the site further, read the essays, subscribe to the newsletter, all the fun jazz. Oh, and also if you also respond to the listener feedback survey, that's also cool. Just get involved in any way you can. I always love that. Okay, so today's conversation is with Josh Broun. Josh is the co-owner of Impact Kitchen. Impact Kitchen is a wellness company with 4 restaurants in Toronto. I've been a fan of Impact Kitchen since its first location at King East, and I've been a patron here at least I'd say once a week for the last few years. It's one of my staple places for legit healthy meals, and although I say healthy meals, but my go-to is a paleo waffle. It's kind of a comfort food, but it's still, I'd say, quite healthy, just the ingredients that they use, and it just tastes amazing too, which is awesome. It's so because I love this place so much, it's just been a real treat for me to actually get to speak with Josh, the man who helped create a place where I could get awesome coffee, work out for like a few hours, as well as have some high quality healthy foods, just all in an awesome atmosphere. I like to commonly call it's like a little bit of Vancouver in Toronto, just because of the overemphasis on just healthy foods like grass-fed beef, everything organic, like that kind of deal. So, more about Josh though. Josh's journey did not start as a restaurateur. I'll give you a hint. It involves going to university on a baseball scholarship in the US, studying health science back in Toronto, or back in Ontario, and pursuing teaching, then firefighting, then becoming a personal trainer for successful entrepreneurs. So that's a hint, and I don't know, maybe you've met other restaurateurs who've gone through that. I haven't. And we go through various parts of the journey, just like how one part being how Josh rekindled an inner entrepreneurial fire that he had earlier on, ever since he was young. And he rekindled that while getting masterclasses on business from his clients, as he learned about their lives over the years that he was a personal trainer. And we also explore the stress he felt when he didn't feel like he had his life figured out at 25, to the journey of starting Impact Kitchen at 35, to what it's been like in the last 5 years of building the business. And, this is one of those, for me, it was a really exciting conversation to meet someone who was like-minded and who had a big impact to my life, at least on like a weekly basis. So this was a real treat for me, and I really do hope it becomes a real treat for you. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Josh. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast, we have Josh Broun, the co-owner of Impact Kitchen. Hey Josh, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited too. I've been really waiting for this moment. But before I tell my audience why, I'd first like to ask you to kind of explain what Impact Kitchen is and describe to my audience what your business is all about.
Yeah, so Impact Kitchen is a fast casual restaurant with a cafe component, a retail component, a baking component. Just to go back to why Impact started. It really stemmed from this desire and need to have the cafe, the restaurant with protein add-ons, the baked goods, pressed juices, smoothies. We kind of got carried away of just creating a wish list of everything we would want in a concept. And my partner Frank Tosca and I never once really thought about like the logistical side of it. It was just let's build like our dream place and figure it out as we go. So, and that's kind of how the idea started. And my background is fitness and nutrition. He's a lifelong passion for wellness. So with the idea of wanting to do all those things, there needed to be a nutritional approach and a wellness approach to all the menu items we created.
Awesome. And I think right now you have 4 locations throughout Toronto, right?
Yeah, 4 locations. We're super excited. Just 2 weeks ago, our 4th opened up in Queens Quay area at 88 Queens Quay West, which has been awesome to kind of come into this neighborhood and start to build our community down here. And it feels like it's like from our original location on King East, where we were one of the first new businesses to come into Corktown, and there wasn't necessarily the community feel. And with Impact and other businesses like Lyft across the street, there's become this amazing community in Corktown. So that's really become essential to Impact Kitchen. Is every area in the city we go into, we put a lot of work into building the community and fostering those relationships, and obviously trying to create the best customer experience when they come into the store to build up that loyal base of customers.
Mm-hmm. And for the audience, this reminder, like I was super excited to have this interview, as I told you earlier on before we recorded, because I've just been such a big fan for such a long time, since like the single location at King East. And I remember telling my girlfriend that it felt like a little pocket of the West Coast inside a East Coast city, just because like growing up from Vancouver, Vancouver's always just been a very like outdoorsy, very wellness focused area. And when I go to Impact Kitchen, like at least like in the King East area, it just felt like, oh, I'm just surrounded by everyone else that thinks and like believes in the same things I do. It's all about clean eating, all about wellness, fitness, and you just can tell like most people here all just came from the gym and just about to get their nutrition fix in.
Well, especially at King East, that was definitely the initial outreach. My network was the wellness industry. So my goal in life at that time was to have the trainers, the nutritionists, the naturopaths, the functional medicine doctors come into Impact Kitchen and have myself introduce them to the concept. And then the goal was that they would like it and then start referring their network. Because I know, if you have a amazing naturopath that you see and you respect them, you're probably going to take their advice. And if they're saying, there's a new restaurant that's opened up that you can go and trust the food, they use high quality ingredients, they have bone broths, they have things that I recommend for you to eat. That was where I thought, like, I still believe word of mouth marketing is the best. And when we opened the King East, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't even have a website for the first year. So it was 100% word of mouth. And I credit that to all our success and how we built a foundation of customers throughout the city. It was just through the word of mouth. And I love even at the new Queens Quay in the first 2 weeks, I'm hearing people come in and bringing a friend, and then they're like selling Impact to their friend of why they should be eating here. And it's so cool to hear other people passionate to bring their friends because they respect and like what we're trying to do at Impact.
Yeah, honestly, as someone who actually does that to a lot of my friends, there's also a little bit of like the self-gratification where when the friend goes, oh, you're actually right, this is amazing, and they start going there a lot, and then I go, nice, I made a bit of a change to someone's life. But at the same time, I realize that now there's always going to be a seat occupied that might have been empty before. So there's always that little bit of like, even while I was scheduling this interview, I was thinking, oh man, I wonder if more people will go to Impact because of this interview, and then I might lose out on my seat. I'm going to have to go earlier on my like weekend journeys all the time now.
Well, one of the cool things about Queens Quay is it's our biggest location seats wise. So
it's true,
we have an interior patio and then an exterior patio and then inside seating. So we have a total of 150 seats. So that's going to be awesome, especially when the nicer weather turns over and we can fill up, 100 plus seats throughout the day. It's gonna be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And in terms of your background, like you spoke about how you're coming from the health and nutrition side, and I'm curious, was that kind of like your background, like even as like a kid, like were you always very passionate about health, sports?
Yeah, so like getting into it as a career, I guess when looking back was a natural evolution, but it wasn't necessarily my game plan. So I was definitely the kid who did not thrive at school, the traditional setting, but thrived in sport. And I used sport as like a way to get through school. For me, in school, early age diagnosed with learning disabilities, ADHD, and really struggled in school. And I can reflect on it now and think about the pros and cons of that, but going through school was a real challenge. And then you start to think about behavioral issues that came up. And it was essentially like a rebelling and an embarrassment and an insecurity of not being able to read as well as other kids in my class, struggling with math. And then the behavioral outbursts happen because of all those things. So I really credit sports for really getting me through that time. And I went all in on sports because I was more gifted in that area of my world. And, when you get to grade 11, grade 12, and you start thinking about university, and I grew up in an area where probably 90% of my friends went to university. And it wasn't going to be an option for me because of my grades. But sports motivated me to at least meet the requirements because I started getting attention from U.S. schools for baseball. And that was the goal of mine from a young age. So I was able to get my grades together and go down and play baseball there. But school was still not the focus. And after I played baseball there, I came back to Ontario to finish my degree at the University of Western. And I did health science just because nothing else interests me, graduated, and then took a year off, traveled, backpacking, through Asia, Africa, and Europe. And, I definitely think, I learned more in that year than I did in my education. But still coming back from that, I went on that trip to find myself and all that, but still didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a career path, and that's around 25. And, it's at that point in your life, it's pretty stressful not having a direction and not knowing what you want to do. So my two career path choices were to become either a teacher. My mom was a teacher. My dad was an educator. So that was logical. And so I went down that road. My mom worked with special needs kids her whole life and dedicated her life to helping that population. So I got into being a teaching assistant for special needs kids and loved it. But after 2 years, decided that wasn't my career path. So then the next thing was, and sports is still a passion of mine, but I had to, I wasn't going to go pro or anything like that. So now I was just playing more for fun. So the next thing that I thought would be a great career that could maintain the active lifestyle that I loved and playing sports was firefighting. So I went to Seneca College. It's like a 3-semester program there. I loved it, did that. And then I just assumed you'd step right into a job, especially if you graduated with good marks and, passed all the physicals and whatnot. So then you learn quickly that it doesn't work like that. And you have to wait for the city that you want to get hired into hire, because a city like Toronto only hires every couple of years. And you go, it's a lengthy process to get hired. It can take easily 6 months or longer for a lot of people. And so in that time, that was my plan. My friend moved to Collingwood, who was a personal trainer in a condo building. He's like, you can have a few clients of mine. I'm moving. They're all cash. Super easy. I had a sports background, a health science degree, but no training certifications. So I said, sure, I'd love to take these guys on, make some money, and I thought it would be fun. So I worked with these two gentlemen, and then within a couple of weeks, got a referral into a lady who lived in Rosedale, who is very socially connected, very just super inspiring lady, uber successful in her field, and just a go-getter. And worked with her. She referred me to, my now business partner, Frank, and his life partner, Darren. And then that's happened in the first 6 months. And these two guys are two of the most inspiring people you could ever meet as well. So I started to think to myself, this is interesting. I'm loving doing it. I'm in a pretty unique network of people already. Like maybe I should give this a go. So then I kind of started going through the journey of getting the certifications in the fitness and nutrition world. You start with Canfit Pro, then you go on and you look at like the Charles Poliquins, the I did the fascial stretch therapy. Kevin Darby, who owns DTS, actually attached to our King East location, has an awesome certification program. I did some of his, went through my CrossFit phase of certs, and just got really passionate about it, and started getting referrals from my new clients whose their networks are also high performers and achievers. And then like all of a sudden a year or two goes by and I'm like uber busy, getting to travel to some other cities for fitness related jobs. And that's kind of how I got into the fitness and nutrition space. And then it's a long-winded answer, but so that like I'll kind of jump into how that evolved though on my mindset, because it took over a couple of years, but it hit me one day. I'm getting to spend an hour a day, 3 to 5 times a week with like amazing people, and essentially I was getting a masterclass like multiple hours a day. I'd go to one client's house and a lady could be a CEO of a company. I'd go to a next person's house and the gentleman could be an uber successful entrepreneur. Then the next person's house could be someone who's the CEO of a hedge fund. And you're working one-on-one with someone for an hour. You're talking like between breaks, and over time, they start to open up and talk about their life. And I think I'm a firm believer. You've heard the saying that you're the common denominator of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So during those few years, I think my ambition level went from like a 5 or 6 out of 10 to like a 9 or 10 out of 10, just because I started to really think like, I think I can do bigger things than maybe I initially thought in my life. Not that being a teacher or a firefighter, they're amazing careers, and I have lots of friends who are doing both. Amazing lifestyles, and they're super happy people. But then I started to think, bigger on an entrepreneurial scale, because I was always an entrepreneur. Did the paper route, had the landscaping company in high school. I wasn't very employable. I never really had a job ever, except I did some sports camps for a few years in summers at university. And yeah, I guess I always was an entrepreneur, but I wasn't thinking about that for a career. It's weird. Neither of my parents were. They weren't super excited about that idea because that was foreign to them. But then when I got the training business going and I started proving to myself and peers that this is like I was making a good living and it's a real job, but then I started to think about what could come after training clients in their homes.
Wow, that's definitely a very unconventional journey. And then as you were telling me that, it reminded me, this is why I do the podcast, just because it's so fascinating. I had no idea that you actually went through the whole like teaching path, or you thought about the teaching path, and you went down like the firefighter route. And like I knew about the personal training side because from like your past interviews, but this side, I'm wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that was the path.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like as you're talking about like the Canfit Pro, I ended up getting my Canfit Pro personal training license too when I was in university, and it's funny. Like I tell people how powerlifting was my way into like all my like top jobs, and it literally was, because when I was doing my first like accounting interview for like one of the big 4 firms, we talked about was powerlifting in my personal training license for like 30 minutes because nobody else, like the partner I'd ever spoken to, had that.
Yeah.
And then apparently, according to one of the recruiters, the partner forgot my name, but he said, I want the guy that lifts 400 pounds.
Nice.
And so that was just my brand. And
that's awesome.
That just kind of cascaded into like everything. But what I found like really interesting is the way you approach the 5 closest person equation. Because the most common times I see it being used is like related to who you work with in terms of like your colleagues at work or your friends or who your family members are. But to actually approach it in terms of who your clientele is, I think that got me thinking in like a different mindset for sure, where it made me like reflect on, yeah, who are my clients? Like, because if you're in like a certain kind of role, like if you're an accountant, then the people that you spend a lot of your time with, who are your clients on, in like an investment bank, for example, that can actually dictate the 5 people that you spend a lot of time with, and that can influence your mindset in that manner as well. And so that was like, I'm curious, was that when did it start becoming like an intentional thing where you started going out to find like clients that you'd be inspired by? And
well, it was accidental. Like I didn't seek that. It just that happened organically. Where I think I got asked a lot, like from personal trainers, like how I built that business.
Right.
And like I would 100% say it. Like I was no better of a trainer than dozens of other trainers in the city. And I think I approached the training sessions, and I think maybe the reason I love the hospitality industry, because I really tried to, like, I knew I had an hour with that person. And so like if the person was an author, or I knew they were interested in a certain subject, like I went really hard deep into like reading their books and making sure I understood their world in terms of what they did. Now, but I didn't tell them I did that because I didn't want, like, if they didn't want to talk about their world, like, you have an individual who's into finance, but during our sessions they only want to talk sports. I talk sports, but if they want to talk finance, I think it maybe helped that I had a little baseline of knowledge there, and then I could at least have a conversation about it. Like my partner Frank was the co-founder of MAC Cosmetics, and like makeup, beauty, pop culture were maybe things that I didn't know a ton about, but I tried to educate myself as much about it because it became super interesting to me, because I was then now training somebody who created like a huge movement through that business. He like the story. He's so humble, but the stories of the MAC AIDS Fund and how much money it's risen hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. All his philanthropy, just the story of how he started that company in his mom's kitchen sink and grew it to an international brand. Like you can imagine like that masterclass of entrepreneurship stories that you hear from spending 3 hours a week with somebody for 5 years. So like what I found was I got lucky of who was referring me, like who I was referred to. And, I was able to stay with these people, a lot of them for 5 years plus. So you really get to know somebody. And over the time, that's where it just kind of hit me one day that I was an in-home trainer. So I was going to homes. So you get to know someone even at a more intimate level. That's like, it just took a lot of time. Like I wasn't intentionally seeking out. It just kind of like hit me one day that I'm with these incredible people who are famous in their particular field. And I had friends who were in those fields who would be like you're with this person for like an hour to 3-5 times a week. Like, do you know who they are? And to me, they were just like my client and like someone who I got to know really well. And I didn't like, it wasn't like I was like uber excited because they were, a famous author. I just thought it was super cool that they were like a really good person into their wellness. And so they wanted to hire a trainer, and like we got along. But subliminally, the level of ambition was 100% raised because it kind of automatically seeps into your mental, your mindset.
And I think there's like it's from the outside looking in, it's one of those things that might not be obvious to people as like an opportunity that resides in like that kind of particular occupation. Like my first instance of that was, so my brother is a kinesiologist, and so my parents have 2 powerlifters in the family, which makes it a little interesting in terms of how we approach like food and diet and everything. And we make our parents squat and deadlift. Yeah. Good. But he like one day like he would casually like tell me, oh yeah, like I have this entrepreneur and this entrepreneur as my clients, and I'd be like, are you serious? Like the guy that like co-founded like that like entire like steakhouse chain? And he's like, yeah, I just see him a couple hours a week. And like in my mind, I think, what are you asking him? Like all the wealth of knowledge you could get from that. And that got me thinking about, wow, there's so many ways where people can actually build up networks. And it's funny because when I was part of the thing, people close to me would tell me, oh, like, what are you gonna do with powerlifting? Like, were you gonna like meet a bunch of rich people at a gym or something? Like, you should learn how to golf. That's where all the business networking happens, when you golf. And the funny thing is, from powerlifting, I ended up building like a pretty good network of people who are all like VPs of private equity funds and CFOs. Because when you're the only guy lifting like 300 pounds, people start coming up to you and they go, "Hey, can you teach me how to do that?" And then we just end up talking, and I'm like, "Oh, so you're like some CFO? Oh, you're some hedge fund guy." And then they end up just becoming like we've been friends for like 6 years for some of them.
That's awesome.
And it's funny.
And you didn't do that on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
You got into powerlifting because you had a passion for it.
Yeah.
And then good things happen, because I think also people recognize that you're not powerlifting for networking.
Right.
Whereas if you had tried the golf route, you probably wouldn't have loved it, and people probably would have figured out that you're only at this golf course for the networking, and then that would have come across as fake, and you wouldn't have built those relationships.
Right. And I'm curious for you, when you were building on your personal training business, like when before that you were trying to be a firefighter, and so you actually went to you went to Seneca to learn all the basics. But for personal training, it just kind of came out from like a past degree that you had. And so for you, when you got all these highly influential people, how did you have any kind of like imposter syndrome on like, can I actually coach them, and what do they want? Like, do they want to be like a top tier athlete as well as being like a top tier entrepreneur?
It's funny, because I do have imposter syndrome now, being like a founder of a company, going to certain events
now you do.
Yeah, I do get that, but for training I never had it, because like my high school years I was obsessed with increasing my vertical leap and throwing a baseball harder. Like, I wanted to be able to slam dunk and throw a baseball 90 miles an hour. Early, I had like Nolan Ryan's Bible of pitching. I had these things called strength juice. I was learning about plyometrics. Like, I really actually I was like something I was passionate about. I wasn't doing it for anybody else, but I like learning how the body worked. And I like to figure out for my own self, like, okay, how can I increase my vertical leap? Okay, like, how can I throw a baseball harder? How can I run faster? And like, how can I bench press more? How can I do more chin-ups? So that was like something I always said, even through university. Like, yes, I have a health science degree, but I can say that didn't teach me a lot about how to make the body perform better. Like, I learned the foundations, and I'm glad I did, like the anatomies, the physiologies, the biologies, because you have a understanding of the human body. But I don't think it made me a better trainer. I think I knew how to train someone because I had been an athlete and I had wanted to perform. But definitely, like, so also as you start to train people, you start to recognize when you get new clients, well, that's how nutrition came into play. Because if you were my client and you wanted to lose, say, 40 pounds, I can guarantee I'll make you fitter. Like, I can make you squat more, I can make you press more, whatnot. But I could not, it's hard for me to guarantee I'm going to make you lose those 40 pounds unless you buy into eating healthy. And I had clients who were not getting the results they wanted to because I wasn't zoned in on nutrition at all. Like, I was just their trainer. So then it became educating myself on nutrition, and then it became educating myself on coaching, because nutrition is really challenging. You can't just tell somebody, okay, here's a 1,500 calorie a day diet, follow it. Like, there's a lot of psychological factors involved. There's a lot of behavioral change involved. There's a lot of habit forming, habit breaking methodologies involved. So that became interesting to me later on, and then the nutrition became a bigger focal point, and then kind of that's also at the same time when impact started to become something I was thinking about.
And I think that's a good segue to then go into like that impact side. Like, when did it go from being just an idea that you and Frank just talked about during your training sessions to actually being, why don't we actually start this and execute on this idea and turn it into a business?
Well, it's an awesome story, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to even get to know Frank in the training world. But we were talking entrepreneurship one day, and he gave me permission to approach him if I ever had an idea I was passionate about, because we were talking about, well, I knew from working with wealthy people how challenging it is in their life because they get asked for money a lot, and if they have a publicly known net worth, it's very hard to say no for what is to them a small amount of money, but for somebody else a lot of money. And that's why they surround themselves with people. It's hard to get to them. So the idea of asking a client for money was never even a thought in my mind. Like, I can honestly say I never even thought about it. But as soon as he said that, I knew that it was an opportunity of a lifetime, and I had to act on it. So, essentially, it was approaching him with the basic concept for what this might look like, and I approached him, and essentially he's like loved the thought of it. And then probably from that moment on, we would essentially use our training sessions to brainstorm for almost a year what it would look like. And now he'd already like approved to go ahead, so I knew it was going to happen. But it was, and then once we kind of got a really good idea, it was like, for me, it was like, okay, now we're actually opening a restaurant. How do we do that? Because I had never even thought about like, okay, like how do you open a restaurant? It was like, how do we get this concept that we're both comfortable with? And like, you have a lot of like kind of honest talks about what we want out of the business. There's a quote that I use with my team, and it was around, he said, we're going to make it with high quality ingredients, or we aren't going to make it at all. And he's like, we got to draw a line in the sand and never cross that line. He's like, if we grow this business, you're going to get pressure to cut corners. And he's like, and so for your investor to say that, like a bank would never say that to me, right? So that kind of was a statement that at least we're going to grow this business in an ethical way. And I'm not going to get an opportunity to grow it unless we can prove the concept using the kind of food and ingredients that adhere to, not what has now become our food philosophy.
And I love that constraint that was kind of already set out, where it's like, this is what
it was perfect. Like at the time you think about it as powerful, but then it's like I use that in my head office meetings, like when I'm talking to the team all the time. It's a statement that your top investor is making to the entire company.
Right. And so if you ever have like people cut corners in ingredients, because there's usually at the end a financial result that they're trying to hit by cutting those kinds of corners. But if you set up from the outset like, no, we're not going to cut corners at all in ingredients, then you'll have to problem solve and find different innovative ways of solving the problem a different way.
That's the name of the game for us.
But I can only imagine though, like from a customer standpoint, like that's what you want to hear. That's why I go to Impact Kitchen. But I can only imagine when you actually said something so aspirationally kind of strong as like, we only do high quality ingredients, that there's definitely a lot of obstacles that you have to just try to overcome. There's probably a lot of hardships where it's like, shit, this is so hard because we set this bar at quite a high level, I think, for a restaurant. And I'm curious, what moments are there that kind of come to mind of like that kind of high bar kind of making things a little harder to run a restaurant?
Well, I've kind of glazed over the challenges, in general.
Let's go into that.
There was unlimited. So like first off, it was like, how do you open a restaurant? So literally like, not knowing what equipment you need, not knowing like the ventilation systems you need. So I Googled how to open a restaurant. And
perfect.
Yeah, that's what everyone does. But then there's a consulting company that I hired and used them to kind of guide me through like equipment necessary, like how many knives and forks you need to buy, what kind of stoves you need to buy, like you got to have a dishwasher, like what companies to bring in. So that was awesome to have. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Worked with a lady named Jenny Companion at the 15 group. So that really helped me get to a point where we could open. And then, year one, Frank was awesome in terms of, for the first probably 4 months, he's like, let's not worry about the numbers. Let's just like create an environment where the customers can have the best experience possible. So, we would be there greeting customers at the door. And then I really think a big part of our early kind of success was we made a lot of mistakes, painful ones, but 9 out of 10 times it was either Frank or myself going over to the customer, bringing them a new bowl or a new baked good, trying to appease the situation. And we weren't busy, so we could spend time and get to know our customers. And, I still have customers today who talk about like, yeah, the first time I ever came, like Frank shook my hand and I had no clue who he was. And, just created like awesome welcoming. And then they probably say, yeah, you guys messed up my bowl, but but it was all good. But I like a lot of those ups and downs in the early days, and then around 4 months, it was okay. Like we got to look at these numbers. They're not good. Okay, we need a strategy. So I actually brought the 15 group back, and Jenny came back in. Okay, she's like, you need to get your food costs to here. You need to get your labor costs to here. You got to get your operations costs to here, and let's start working on this. So like week over week, labor was a huge issue for us because I didn't really know how to write a schedule. I didn't know how to manage that. So it was like figure that out, get it down to the percent goal we want. Okay, food costs. We were here. We got to get it down to here. Okay, what's the strategy? Like, do we need to get new suppliers? We had to get better on our waste. Like so many little strategies. And then, over the next 4 months ish, we started to turn the numbers to look pretty good. And then the last 4 months of the first year started to actually feel like, okay, we might actually make it here. We might get something. We started to get a lot of the early loyal adapters. And started to like make a little bit of money, and then by the end of year one, we had kind of hit a good stride, and then did really well year two. And during that year was when kind of Frank said, okay, I think we can open on the west side, like another location, and we found the one in Adelaide and Brant. And then when you go from 1 to 2, that creates a whole new round of issues because you're managing people, you're trying to create systems and processes, like getting that consistency from one location to the other. And these are like kind of like a powerful thing as an entrepreneur, the path you go down. You start to recognize all the things you're not good at, and you have to accept that, and you have to bring people into your company who are better than you at a lot of things, and give them a lot of freedom and flexibility to do what they're good at, and then just maintain a working relationship and find the right reporting structure to allow a company to scale and grow. And that's kind of where we're at now. We've got this incredible team of like really passionate people who love our core values. They love our food philosophy, and we've got a head office now from HR, regional people, director of operations, marketing, catering, and like the team. I have to step back sometimes and marvel at how good they all are and how hard they work. And that's the journey, and kind of the rewarding feeling now is just that team and then the work they're putting in. Because we know, like, we feel like we have an opportunity here to really prove concept and take us to the next level where we can go to Frank, our investor, and say, okay, we're ready to keep growing. So that's kind of where we're at now.
And it's been about 4.5 years, 5 years?
Yeah, 4.5 years.
4.5 years. Yeah. Wow. And you're already at 4 locations. That's pretty fast, I think, right?
It's pretty fast. Like considering also like we had no one on our roster is from the restaurant industry.
Right.
Yeah. So we've kind of learned as we go, and just through kind of hard work and good people, we've allowed ourselves to grow to 4 so far.
And when you first had the idea, the idea that Frank gave an okay to, how does that compare to what turned out to be like the working profitable model by end of year one? Like, how does those two versions compare?
It's funny because the actual original idea is pretty much the same. Yeah. It's just so when I talked to Frank, he's like, do you want a partner or an investor? And I said, well, if you're willing to partner, that's something that I didn't know that you'd be interested in doing, so I'd love to have you do that. So the concept kind of times 10 kind of automatically with him being involved, because he's that type of entrepreneur. Like, he's not gonna open up a 300 square foot like smoothie bar. So I had like probably asked for X amount, and then he got involved, and we times it by a lot, and that allowed us though to really make our own pressed juices, make our own broths, buy the equipment to do our own baking, buy the equipment to make everything in-house. And that's been key to who we are. Like no one else can really say that. We have a lot on our menu, and that I kind of joked with you earlier, that kind of just stemmed from us getting carried away of everything we could possibly want and imagine. and everyone told us that was a bad idea. But you know, he also said something like, you know, if we have to do what we want to do, because if it doesn't work, we're always going to regret doing what other people told us to do. So, you know, we did it all. But you know, that's also something that has differentiated us in the industry, is having like a huge wide variety of options.
Wow, and that gives me a lot of clarity into like why the King Street location, the first one, was relatively big for, I think, like a venture, like a first restaurant.
And that's still where we had a huge, like, you don't even see half the space. We have a huge back of house. So we've built our commissary there. So now, like, we do the broths in massive vats there, and we drive it to the other locations. We do the baking there, and they get baked off at the locations. And we do the salad dressings there. So yeah, we treat it's a commissary kitchen.
That we use. Wow! Yeah, I had no idea that you had such a huge space behind it.
Yeah, wow, it's big.
Damn. And how, in one way, like, you made it seem like it was a very easy decision. It was like, oh yeah, Frank's gonna join as a partner, and we're gonna have all this thing going out. But you know, prior to this taking off, you had a very successful personal training business for like 5-6 years. What was the transition like, where you went full time into Impact, and how did that play out in your mind?
It was pretty smooth. Like, I knew as soon as we got going at Impact that this was going to be what I did for a long time. Like, it's kind of that like naive, blind confidence of like, there's just no option for it to not work. And Impact is so like near and dear to like who I am. Like, I knew it was going to work. I never wavered, even through we had hard times, but I never wavered on it working. So I had to start, letting go of some, like, moving on from clients. I didn't like I had no business mindset then. So I wasn't building a business to sell it. So that was not even like a part of my thought process. I more or less did what my friend did for me. I gave clients to friends, and that's all I did. And then I was able to, now this is also a unique situation because I had a partner like Frank. I was able to streamline into Impact and pay myself like a modest salary before we even opened, which is a unique for any entrepreneur. So that's, I'm super grateful for that. But I was able to, more or less pay myself something that would allow me to pay my bills. And then I knew as we opened and got into the first or the second year, if we were doing well, I would be able to pay myself more. So that's kind of just how it happened. I was probably 6 months to a year before we opened, I went full time on Impact. And then it was just essentially the 15 group, the way they do it, they call it like the pre-opening package or whatever. And you get like a list of like 1,000 things that have to get done in order to open a restaurant. So it was like just creating that work back schedule and that mindset of every day kind of checking a few things off the box. And that's when I was telling you that I was working at cafes for that year, and I just had like a rotation of like 3 different cafes. And then that got me even more excited for the concept, because I was like, if there was only a place like Impact, I would go there every day and just work there. Because that's just like, for me, I wanted the high quality food at a cafe with great coffee.
That's so meta. It's like you actually you're in a cafe working out the schedule to build out the kind of cafe restaurant that you want.
Yeah, that's really what happens.
Wow. And you also mentioned about how, there were many pain points and times when things were really hard. And, on this podcast, we like to explore all the intangible sides of things. And I think the hard things are the really important things that actually, I think, test whether we have the perseverance to push on. And actually, that's when I think whether are you doing this for some extrinsic reason like money or fame or pride, or is this actually something you actually truly believe in, you have the conviction for. And I'm curious, what are some hard times that kind of come to mind as like, yeah, these were some pretty tough moments?
Well, I think it all kind of falls on my shoulders and stems from me for what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. Like in the early days, I would say I was 100% like a micromanager. I was there from open to close 7 days a week, and I didn't feel comfortable never not being there and being like involved in whatever decisions were getting made for the day. And so like it was, and so at the time I also had a 1-year-old kid and a second child on the way in that first year. So, obviously zero time at home, and, a business that was kind of having a lot of ups and downs for the books, and then B, the people. So I started working with a coach, and, he was more or less at the beginning to kind of mentor me on how to run a restaurant, how to manage people. And then it kind of turned into kind of some life coaching and some time management coaching. And, he said a really powerful thing to me once in terms of like time management. So, we would block off times in my schedule, and it was like, okay, you got to start spending time with your kids because you've told me that's a huge priority for you. The exercise was like, what is most important to you? You write that on like the left column of a page, then you have your week schedule. So if you say family, your wellness, and impact are the 3 things that are most important to you, but this week you did 95% impact, 2% family, 2% wellness, like something like that. He's like, you're not living a balanced life. So, block off time for your kids, and then week over week, I would say, okay, I'm not coming to the restaurant on Sunday. And then, Saturday a crisis happens because I hadn't prepared my team well enough. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to come in on Sunday and fix the problem because I'm the only one that can do it. Like, that was the mindset. So he said to me, he's like, Josh, after failing multiple weeks in a row, he's like, I want you to write your eulogy from your kid's perspective. So, that was like the biggest punch in the gut, right? Like, it makes you want to clam up and think about that. So that actually moment was a key moment for me. It was where, okay, you can't micromanage, you have to delegate, and you have to at least create early systems and procedures so you don't have to open the restaurant, you don't have to close the restaurant. I have to start empowering people in the business so that I can step away a little bit. And then what was the best part of all this was that's when you go through that journey of realizing that people are better than you at a lot of things. And the only way to grow a business is to have really awesome people on your team that can support you and the company on what they're best at. And so that was like, the early phase. I can remember working with a general manager we had at the time, and she was really good at like the checklists and helping me write like some of the early systems that then allowed me, we'd give those checklists to the opening manager. Okay, you're going to open this day a week, these days a week. So then I just started to step back, and she started to thrive more. And that's been like the story of the last 4 years. You find someone who's awesome and fits the culture that I wanted to foster, empower them, and most of the time they surpass expectations. And that's been the best part of the last few years, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that eulogy exercise is definitely a really powerful one. I use mine to help discern like what I should, kind of the paths I should kind of pursue in my life. But I think for you, where it's also kind of resetting priorities and resetting focus, that's actually like another very valuable thing. At the end of the day, it's all a focus on what is truly important to you.
Yeah, that's what it is, right?
Yeah, and
and to live your life according to what is
right.
most important to you.
Exactly.
So that was a really good, clear exercise for me.
Mm-hmm. And how did it actually feel though to relinquish that kind of control, like the need to?
It felt amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. You were like anxious about it?
No,
at all?
like it just because you saw how it helped the business.
Mm.
It helped me, but it helped the business. People were more engaged. They felt more empowered. They liked their job better. You saw people step out of their shell. It was amazing. It was the best thing that could have ever happened. And, I knew I wasn't good at certain things, but I felt like I had to do them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was amazing to now have people who liked that stuff and were really good at it. And I trusted. Like, there's a whole other conversation around finding the right people, like company that adheres to our company values, that are the right fit. But if you find those people that meet all our criteria, like, there's nothing more rewarding for me now than to have those people join the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where there's a rational argument and the intellectual argument where it's like, yeah, that makes total sense. But I can only imagine like it's definitely like it's something you have to grow into. I think.
For sure. Like, I can tell you stories. So when I was working with the general manager, Like my whole thing was I was always on the floor greeting customers. Like that was what I loved to do. But I knew, because I knew we were going to have the opportunity to grow to the Adelaide and Brantwood, I would have to literally go in the back and lock myself in the office and let her own the lunch shift.
Wow. Okay.
And I couldn't in the early times. Like I couldn't leave because
Right.
I had to be there in case something went wrong. I could run out and do something. But it was like, that was hard because that's what I had done for probably a year straight. I probably didn't miss a lunch. And then, but I knew I had to start missing lunches and let her like be the general manager. So yeah, I would sit in the office and I would twiddle my thumbs and I would be having anxiety. And then I would poke my head out and I'd be like, okay, everything's good. You know, like they're doing just as good as if I had been out there. And so then you start to say, okay, like, you know what, like the place isn't going to burn down. Customers aren't going to leave. You know, the general manager's got it. So then that's when you start, okay, I don't need to be here on this day. Like I can leave early. And then that was the empowerment of stepping back a little bit. And because if you, like, as we started to think about the second one, you know, then you've got a lot of other responsibilities. So at that point, you know, the team could essentially run the restaurant on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in one particular kind of article, you mentioned how you're working 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and this kind of exercise of trying to trust your people and like really figuring out what's really important to you, what's very instrumental in changing your mindset and like changing your perspective on, maybe I don't need to do 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. But there's like, I think for people who go on the entrepreneurial journey, there's always that struggle with, in your mind, you always feel like you have to do more, and there's like a constant, sometimes at least for me, like there's like a nervousness when I'm not constantly doing something related to growing the business or doing something about it. But like for you, like how do you like answer that kind of like this concern or question that people have, where it's like, would you have been able to achieve so much if you didn't?
So this is a great question. I love this question because now I'm in a position where I talk to some entrepreneurs who are in their beginning phase of their journey, and a lot of people seem to have the 4-hour work week dream, like as they're starting their business. And I have zero regrets of spending that much time in the business at the beginning, because I do think it's super valuable for you to go all in and to know every facet of your business in the early days. And you know, I look back on that time and I actually have nothing but great memories. Like I liked being there from open to close, and I loved it actually. And the only reason, I started to stop because of the eulogy comment, because I had the family and my daughter was born in like 8 months into the first year. So that kind of was a huge life change that forced me to reevaluate that. But then because I was in the growth mindset before we should have been. Like I have a recollection in like probably 5 or 6 months in, even we had no customers, we weren't profitable. And I was like, hey Frank, like I think we should open a second one. And he's kind of like, I think you need to slow down there, buddy. Like, let's get some like a year under our belt at least, and at least prove the concept a little bit. But you know, I think it was stemmed because the early adopters were so passionate about us. Like, we got these people; they were coming 5 days a week, and that was like who I was talking to, right? Like the 5 people you're surrounded with. So I was talking to just diehard Impact fans, and I was a diehard Impact fan, so I just automatically knew we were going to grow. Like, which isn't the case, because we had to really do a lot of work to figure out how to get there. But yeah, for like early entrepreneurs, I do think you got to have that grinding, that work hard, kind of make some sacrifices in your life to start your business. But I do think like basically as soon as you can, it's and it depends what your goals are. But if the goal is to scale a company, you have to then bring on people who are better than you at certain things. You have to learn how to delegate. You have to learn what your true strengths are and go all in on those. And then you have to have people you trust, because if you're getting direct reports from people who are doing really important things in your business, you've got to trust them, and you've got to, you know, they're going to be empowered. So setting up that team is crucial.
Mm-hmm. And on this path of, like, you know, you've done myriad of very like interesting things so far. And what what kind of comes to your mind as a particular moment when you felt like you like actually questioned the conventional wisdom on, you know, whether it's like building out impact or even just thinking about like designing your career like so far?
I can't say like, I think like from like my entire life, I've questioned conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
Going back to education, to, you know, what I was focused on in my 20s. And even with impact, like, you know, we're two non-restaurant guys who got into the restaurant world. And when we talk to our team members, like we're no one in our, like, we don't talk about being a restaurant. You know, we're more of a lifestyle brand. And we've, not that every restaurant has a bad culture, but that was like, you get a lot of horror stories about like restaurant worlds, like behaviors. And so we've really approached like our culture as just any business. Like we're not a restaurant, right? Like we have our food philosophy, our core values, and we really try to stick to those and build an environment where people just feel like they're working at a great place to work.
What's one of the horror stories?
Well, just like more so like back in the day, like backhouse stories of potential like substance abuse. Like in the news, there's often there's been some high profile issues with restaurant culture. Now, yeah, I don't know in depth of that, but it was a point of us at the beginning to avoid that if possible.
Yeah, I've had a buddy work at a izakaya tell me how, oh yeah, like all the staff, like, yeah, oh yeah, we're all snorting cocaine before the nighttime shift. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, it's kind of there's a bit of that culture in hospitality. I was like, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, I think it's changing obviously now.
Right, yeah.
But that's, you know, just we've tried to set a tone of that's not really what we're about.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, like impact's very like, I think because maybe you guys took on the approach of being like a lifestyle brand, like there's a lot of education like with the products and stuff on like exactly what's in it, what are the ingredients, and it's very informative. So like I as like a consumer feel very confident that I'm getting probably what I'm paying for. Like it says grass-fed beef, it's probably grass-fed beef. But for like, I find that because there's some people view it kind of as like this trend where people just want to eat healthier. And is there a way for people to be able to like do like a quick test of like, is this restaurant really using high quality ingredients or not? Is there a way for people to know?
Like I don't know how you could really truly audit that.
Yeah.
Now you like, I think that there's a lot. Like I think one of the things we have with our customers is their trust, right? And we respect that trust. Now internally we have a food philosophy that is awesome because, and I wrote the food philosophy in the early days because when I was a nutritionist, I was asked always, what's the perfect way to eat? Is it paleo? Is it vegan? Is it whatever? Mm-hmm. So then my early food philosophy in my training days was just eat minimally processed, nutrient dense, real food. I felt if you were vegan or paleo or whatever, that would apply to you. And I could stand up at a conference and say that and everyone would agree with me. And then we grew the impact food philosophy to be a little bit more robust than that. But we send that food philosophy to our suppliers. All of our kitchen managers like know and adhere to that food philosophy. So it's a huge asset for us with our suppliers because they have our food philosophy. So if they send us something, in the early days, they would try to send us something that maybe didn't adhere to it. And it's easy for me to go back at them and say, you know our food philosophy. Does this adhere to it? And they would be like, no. I'm like, well, why'd you send it to us? They're like, well, maybe we were trying to get you a cheaper product, save you some money. Like they try to sell me like that. Like I have to just say, like, we're not interested if it doesn't meet our food philosophy. So don't even send me that. Like I don't want to know about other products that might be cheaper because it's not like that. Going back to that quote that Frank said, you know, we drew that line in the sand. So it's been, you have to work with your suppliers. It's a constant working relationship. And last year, actually, when we knew we were going to grow a little bit more, we set a company mission to, as we grow and scale, we're going to try to actually get better and better with our ingredients and make that the priority of the company going forward. Partner with some smaller suppliers, try to be a little bit more local and try to roll out a little bit more seasonal menu items.
And so what does your kind of nutritional system look like now?
My personal?
Yeah.
I think I stick to a pretty high plant-based paleo diet. So I'm not against proteins, but like that's one area where like personally I invest my own money if I'm not eating at Impact into like the grass-fed free range style of protein. I play with intermittent fasting, more the 16 and 8 hour windows. I feel great doing it, but sometimes if I work out in the morning like today, I don't like working out on an empty stomach. So I ate this morning 4 scrambled eggs, half an avocado, and some of our granola, Impact's granola and blueberries just at home, and then went to the gym.
That sounds like an awesome breakfast.
Yeah, it was great. And then, yeah, I'm lucky to have Impact in my life. So I went to the gym and then went to Impact, had a macro bowl with steak, arugula, sweet potatoes, and balsamic dressing. So yeah, like I think clean eating is a passion of mine. High quality protein, unlimited vegetables, moderate nuts and seeds, and a lot of healthy fats. And then coffee, water, smoothies, and wine and beer when I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to think of like a balanced approach. Like I'm not actually the person who does like sober October or take like January off from drinking, or like I'm pretty balanced throughout the year. Like I don't go too crazy anymore, and I don't go too strict on anything either.
Yeah, I find like the subject of nutrition is just such a hard world, I think, to be part of. Like it's just so hard to even like keep up with all the white papers that come out, and you read them and you gotta wonder, is this lobbied by like a different food group company? Like who's it written by? And like even before doing intermittent fasting, I had to like read through like maybe 3 or 4 different white papers before I decided, okay, there's gonna be a range that I think, given the data, that I'm pretty comfortable with. So like now I do like a 14 to 18 hour. Like, so it depends on each day, depending on like if I gym in the morning, then I'll have a shorter fast period, like things like that.
Yeah.
But
so one thing that I'm hugely passionate about is I don't know if you've read about like blue zones and sedentarians.
Yes.
So that actually was a huge factor in probably Impact and just my approach on nutrition. So about 10, 15 years ago, National Geographic did the first article. I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who authored all the Blue Zone books. So he did the first article about, he was tasked with going around the world finding places with the most people who lived to 100 years old.
Right.
So we identified, like the Okinawans, the Sardinians, the people, the Loma Linda, California, and there's a place in Costa Rica and other places. And so I just bought his newest book, and I love reading about like the common denominators between these people and longevity. And what was super cool is you realize that like I always thought like, okay, fitness and nutrition are the most important things. And his research says that those are important, but they're not the most important. Like the most important things are having purpose, having a sense of community, being like respected and a focal point as you get older in your family dynamic or community dynamic. And then nutritionally, no processed foods. But there wasn't like the most common ground, actually, I'd say, was vegetables and beans and legumes. Those are the things that people seem to be eating the most of around the world. And exercise wise, it wasn't people who necessarily go to the gym. It was people who move naturally in their day-to-day lives. So a lot of people like walking, number one thing, like Tai Chi, stretching, maintaining mobility, doing manual labor from time to time. I just find that stuff so fascinating, and I love it actually. So at Impact, the most recent round of menu development, our next round of Power Bowls is going to be pretty heavy on the beans and legumes and lentils, just because I think because I was pretty paleo for a while, and those are frowned upon there, but I've really I don't have any actually food intolerances. Was actually another thing I've learned opening Impact is just the power of us having like clean ingredients and having someone that's celiac feel comfortable eating there. People with Crohn's can eat there because we use like really just olive oil and no other kind of oils. Like people that have autoimmune disorders, like leaky gut syndrome and other things, like these people, like they can't eat out, and they were able to eat at our restaurant just because we do have like 100% gluten free and high quality ingredients. So it's been amazing to kind of meet those people, and the appreciation they've had is inspiring for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like you said, where it's definitely not the extremes that actually end up living like having longevity. Like, even like I tell my friends, like, yeah, part of the thing, it's if you did maybe like 70% of what a competitive powerlifter does, I think that'd be like great. But the extremes of any sport, like it's actually probably going to shorten lifespan to a certain degree because you're taxing your body so heavily and you're pushing it to the limits, and that's not really a great way for, I think, fostering longevity. And I think it's like exactly what you said about even diets, where nowadays I've been, after experimenting so many times with so many different diets for like cutting weight and maintaining weight and like not losing strength, what now I'm exploring with is just high quality foods, where before, like, I'd be on like low carb, I'd be on some kind of like a paleo diet, but over time, like reflecting on like the journals I keep on like my nutrition log, it's like it doesn't seem to be as impactful to like cut out carbs. Actually, when I have a lot of carbs, it actually sometimes actually lose weight.
Yeah, and I find like with nutrition too, it's so individualized.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
There are people who can't eat a lot of carbs,
right? Yeah,
and there are people who can't eat a lot of high fat diets. So, like as a nutrition coach now, with the information that we all have now, like you would have to treat every single client. There's no template,
right?
Like,
yeah,
I was coached on calorie templates, right? Like you create if you were a client, you wanted to put on weight. Okay, here's a 3,000 calorie diet, and the food quality wasn't at the top of mind. This is going back like 10 years ago. But now, like, I would agree with exactly what you're saying. If I'm a nutritionist now working one-on-one with somebody, I'm going all in on food quality. I don't care about how many calories they're eating. I don't even really care about their macros.
Yeah.
I'm just caring about quality. And then I'm going to probably veer them on, like, make vegetables 70% of your plate, have protein X, have fats X, and just focus on kind of eating that balanced plate. We get a lot of flack for not showing our calories.
Really?
Yeah, some people, like with the apps, they really want to know that so they can punch those in.
Oh.
But like that was a conscious decision as well, because like that, when Impact was starting is when I actually started to get away from prescribing like calorie counted diets, because I actually saw that was a really ineffective way to coach people, because they either became obsessive or they didn't adhere to it. So that's why one of the reasons why we created the food philosophy is just to kind of tell people that high quality, nutrient dense, real ingredients are kind of like what trumps being so into counting the calories.
Yeah, I think I try to tell these people who ask me for advice, like, to take the bottom up approach, which is time consuming, but I think it's the way to actually individualize and customize, where it's like you eat something, it's fuel. What does it do to your performance? What does it, like, how do you feel the next morning? How do you feel when you sleep? Like, do you get great sleep when you eat X amount? And actually trying to keep track of that and being cognizant of, oh yeah, like when I eat an apple, I feel pretty shitty. Then maybe you shouldn't eat an apple.
For sure.
Like things like that.
Yeah, that's the kind of personal experimentation.
Yeah,
is really what we all should be doing.
And as we kind of wind down closer to the near end leg of the interview, I'm curious. Like, you mentioned earlier on in your journey, like you said, when you were 25, that you felt like the pressure to have something figured out, and I can definitely relate. Where I think even myself and like my peers, like when you hit that kind of age, like there's kind of this stigma of like, well, when you hit 30, you should have everything figured out by then. So then when you're 25, you feel like 5 years is gonna go by so quickly, and people start fretting. And if you were to think back to that 25-year-old self, like the 25-year-old Josh, like, what emotional reaction do you think that Josh would have to what you're doing right now? Do you think he'd be surprised? Do you think he'd be like upset, or do you think he'd be excited?
I think you'd love it, but there is zero chance at 25 I ever thought I'd be in the restaurant world.
Yeah.
Zero chance. It never was a thought in my mind.
And if you could think back to the 25-year-old, so what advice do you wish you could have given that Josh that was, struggling, being maybe somewhat like anxious about what to do?
Yeah, next? For sure. Like, I've said a lot of, like I said earlier on, that like the school system wasn't for me, but I do want to say like it is for some people. Like my wife's an optometrist, and she knew that she wanted to do that from essentially first year university to the 8 years it takes to be an optometrist. Like my best friend's an engineer, and he was always passionate about that. So, and I had a lot of friends who knew what they were going to do. So that really was stressful because I was kind of an outsider in my group of having no clue what I wanted to do. And I think I was thinking about like careers. It's like, what should I be? What career do I need to have? And if I could go back and give myself advice, it would be like, don't focus on like a career. Like focus on what your passions are and where does that take you on? Like what journey is that going to take you on? Like to identify personal core values, personal passions, and try to learn more about yourself, of how you see yourself fitting into the world. And if I'm in the entrepreneurial mindset right now. Like then I wasn't in, but I think that mindset, because it could lead to, I want to be a school teacher. Like my passion is working with people who are 12 to 16 years old. I want to coach their teams. I want to teach them about history, and that would be amazing if that's your passion. But like I don't think I did the work at 25 to really think about my passion. I don't think I had one. Like, and I think that's like a deep exploration. Even when I was traveling, I said I went to find myself. Like I wasn't trying to find myself though. I was trying to think about the careers I wanted to do. So I think I would have a mindset shift of what's your passion, what are your personal core values, and like how are those going to play out in the next 5-10 years of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me, I think the thought I had from there is the idea that because I experienced it too, where I end up wanting a job like a certain title, and then that career, you want that to be your identity, but then you tie your identity to that whatever title it is, instead of the reverse, where you actually have control over your own identity, and then the job is just merely like a proxy. It's just a vehicle that you just take to achieve who you are, and then you can leave that vehicle and then enter another one, like you did, where you went from personal training to being in the restaurant business.
Yeah, like if I also would tell my 25-year-old self to relax a little bit, because I didn't start this venture until I was basically 35. So that's, and then I've met so many entrepreneurs who don't start their venture until they're 42, and now they're 50 and they've built this amazing company, or they might be on their second company. So like I don't really even think of age as a limiting factor at all. I think it's all mindset.
100%. Yeah, I actually had another entrepreneur on recently who started a company after having kids and a family as well, and he was saying, well, there's a lot of pluses that come with age. There's a lot of experience. You have network. Like you have gone through so many mistakes that it adds a lot of value to when you decide to start something really hard like a company.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Yeah. Well, Josh, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your fascinating story with myself and my audience. I definitely learned a ton, and it's definitely made me want to go back to Impact more often than I do. Awesome. knowing all the ingredients and all the work that you put into actually making it happen. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope the story was inspiring to you. Hopefully it also helped you expand your perspectives. Hopefully it also made you question the default path that you might have been going on, or the default beliefs you might have had. And maybe now it'll make you even think about doing something about it, doing something different, maybe challenging yourself, being courageous. Who knows? But regardless, I'm really happy that you took some time out of your day to listen to this fantastic story with my guest. And if you would like to somehow, in some way,
contribute and help support the podcast, and maybe even just be part of the community that I'm trying to build with the greater OMD Ventures platform. Really think about being a stakeholder in the platform. And the quick way to do that is to go to my website, oldmandan.com, and go to the stakeholders page. I believe it's oldmandan.com/stakeholder. And the link is also down below. And that's how you can figure out how you can subscribe, follow to get more updates on the free content, but at the same time also donate, and donate by actually just buying me a coffee. That's just how I put it. And you can buy me a coffee a month, coffee a week, or coffee every day of the year. And think about it as the way that, if you wanted to chat with me, you might just bring me out for coffee and buy me a coffee. Or if you wanted to bring one of my guests out to chat, you might buy them a coffee. So just think of it as I'm the service that's doing that for you, so you can just pay me in coffees. Don't worry, everything will still be free. It would just really help if you would like to show your support this way, so that I can use the coffee money to buy myself actual coffees, and also to buy my guests actual coffees, and use the leftover money to actually grow the platform, as well as even keep it operationally alive as well, because all this isn't really free, and it does take a lot of time to build it as well as operate it and hopefully grow it further. So your support would be amazing if you would like to contribute. And so just check out the website, go to the stakeholders page, and read the different kind of benefits you might even get as a stakeholder. All right, thank you.